I recently took a trip. So on this trip, I went from being alone in the Washington forest in a cabin, alone in the ancient, in the comprehensive, in the content of nature, to within a few days being in what one might say is the complete opposite. Disneyland in Anaheim, California. I went from standing alone in the Washington forest in the nature, kind of in the quiet yet noisy nature that it can get, to being overly stimulated in Disneyland with bright lights flashing, the sounds of rails as the roller coasters go by, in concert with kids screaming on the coasters and children crying at the same time. Of course, I'm not saying that Disneyland is bad. This is not that kind of video. Honestly, I enjoyed my time in Disneyland. It was great. It was super fun. However, this trip, I noticed something in me began to shift. You see, I've been on this journey for a few years now of trying to denoise my life, because I believe that Jesus can be found in the quiet, and prayer is a lot less about talking, even though that's true, and it's a lot more about listening. And so in order for me to hear clearly the voice of God, I need to denoise my life. And here's the thing, I love loud concerts. My favorite genre of music is metal. I love heavy music and loud things. And I like going to movies, and it's fun. I like things like that. And I have no problem, being on the internet, and I don't have any problem with, necessarily stimulation and entertainment by itself. I don't really have a problem with that. But what I did find is that I began to be more shaped by those things instead of Jesus. And Jesus, I found, to me at least, the Holy Spirit doesn't necessarily compete with the noise. He still speaks at a volume. And here's the thing, I'm a part of a church that does these things well, that does music well, that does media well, and it can capture people's attention. And I'm a part of that. I'm the online pastor here, and that's something I care about and something that I believe is important in our culture. However, in the midst of all of that, while I care about capturing people's attention, and I believe that we can do music well and loud things aren't bad, in the middle of that, in the midst of all of that, I'm beginning to find myself drawn to the quiet. I don't value the quiet because I'm emptying myself, like the mindfulness practices. I'm valuing the quiet because I want to create space for the Holy Spirit to fill. I'm inviting the Holy Spirit in, not just emptying myself. I'm not saying all this to say, oh, look at me, I'm awesome, because really I'm bad at it. All this to say is that I want to listen to God. And listening to God is perhaps the biggest thing that's changing my life right now. As we roll into summer, I don't really want to focus on listening to God because it's a good thing we should do as Christians, or it's because, we want to make something happen internally or externally. I want to listen to God because it's less about making something happen and more just about what God is already giving us, what He's already speaking. See, right now we're in a series called Unashamed. I don't know about you guys, but when I find myself defensive or hiding away or shying away from sharing Jesus or even defending the faith, it's not that I'm ashamed of God. It's really I'm ashamed of myself for not having the right answers or not living that kind of life that I'm talking about. Not being devoted to God enough, not doing my devotions, being a hypocrite, so many things that I'm not ashamed of God for, I'm ashamed of myself for. I was afraid that if I sat in the silence, I wouldn't find God with me. Instead, I would find hypocrisy and confusion and darkness. But actually, I found comfort in the silence. I found that when I denoised my life and destimulated my eyes and my habits, that I could pay attention to what God was already saying. And what God was already saying is, I love you. Does this mean I don't have to change anything about my life? No, of course not. But I'm not motivated to be more like Jesus because I'm afraid I will be found out. It's rather is I want to make Jesus proud, and out of my love for Jesus, I am motivated to change instead of changing because I might get busted or for any other reason like that. I'm motivated to change out of love, not out of fear. Really, at the end of all this is I want to denoise and destimulate and be in the silence because that's where the Holy Spirit speaks, and I want to be with God. I want to be connected with God because the kind of person I am when I'm most connected with God is not only the kind of person I want to be, but the kind of people we need in this world. Sitting in silence, in solitude, and being with Jesus helped me to really understand this verse, not mentally, but on an emotional level. If you don't feel like Jesus is your friend or you're a friend to Jesus, stick around and we'll find out together what that means.